Robert the Doll is a true ghost story about a haunted doll in a museum in Key West, Florida. The doll is real, and some say it is the subject of an evil curse. Many people claim they have seen it blinking and moving. Take a look at Robert the Doll for yourself and find out. He sits under lock and key in a glass case located in the basement of a museum in Key West, Florida. At first glance, Robert may seem like a harmless children's toy, but looks can be deceiving because Robert is the most haunted doll in the world. In 1897, a family named Otto lived in a nearby house in Key West. They owned a plantation and had a lot of servants working for them, who they treated very badly. One servant girl gave their son Gene a present, a doll. What the Ottos didn't realize was that this servant girl knew voodoo and black magic. Gene's full name was Robert Eugene Otto. His parents had always called him Gene, so he decided to give the doll his real name, Robert. Many strange things began to occur in the Otto household. Neighbors claimed to see Robert moving about from window to window when the family was out. Gene began to blame Robert for mishaps that would occur. The Ottos claimed to hear the doll giggle and swore they caught glimpses of the doll running about the house. Gene began to have nightmares and scream out in the night. When his parents would enter the room, they would find furniture overturned, their child in a fright, and Robert at the foot of the bed with his glaring gaze. It was Robert. Robert did it, Gene would cry. The doll was eventually put up into the attic, where he resided for many years. But Robert had other plans. Visitors that entered the house could hear something walking back and forth in the attic, and strange giggling sounds. Guests no longer wanted to visit the Otto home. Gene Otto died in 1972, many years after his wife, and the house was sold to a new family. The story of Robert the Doll had died down, but Robert waited patiently up in the attic to be discovered once again. The 10-year-old daughter of the new owners was quick to find Robert in the attic. It was not long before Robert unleashed his displeasure on the child. The little girl claimed that the doll tortured her and made her life a hell. Even after more than 30 years later, she still claims that the doll was alive and wanted to kill her. Robert the Doll, still dressed in his white sailor suit and clutching his stuffed lion, resides in the Mortillo Museum, where he is locked up in a glass case. It's believed that if you take a picture of Robert without his permission, he will put a terrible curse upon you and those unlucky enough to be with you at the time. If Robert lets you take a picture after he nods, you will be safe. However, sometimes this isn't always the case. Robert is still up to his old tricks to this day, and many employees who lock him up every night fear for their lives. Most of them claim that Robert can unlock his case without the key, and that he will tend to walk around the museum and cause mischief. Sometimes he'll move things around. Sometimes he'll even stay in his glass case and move the inside of his case. Or, when visitors are seeing him, he'll move or blink, enough to scare them off. Robert the Doll is a real haunted doll. In fact, it's believed Robert the Doll is more cursed than the Annabelle doll. He is one of the most dangerous haunted dolls out there. And you do not want to be in his way when he curses you. Robert the Doll was the inspiration for the killer doll, Chucky. Mothman is a scary, unexplained creature with large red eyes and large wings like a moth. It was first sighted in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and was made famous by the 2002 movie The Mothman Prophecies, and has appeared before major world disasters. The creature often appears to have no head, with red eyes set into its chest. It has been photographed and been seen by eyewitnesses, and has chased and harassed a number of people. The first sighting of Mothman was in November of 1966 in Point Pleasant, Virginia. Two newlywed couples were driving together on Route 62 when they saw a dark figure on the hillside up ahead. It was almost 7 feet tall, and it had red eyes and large black wings folded behind its back. As they watched it, spread its wings and flew into the air. They sped off, but the dark figure followed them, even though they were driving at over 100 miles per hour. Later that night, a man was at home watching TV when the screen suddenly went dark and was filled with a weird pattern. Just then, he heard a loud, high-pitched whining noise coming from outside his house. When he went out to see what it was, he saw two large red eyes staring at him from the darkness. His dog took off after it and never came back. That night, the man was so scared he slept with a gun next to his bed. Another family in the area spotted a dark figure outside their house. It was almost 7 feet tall, with terrible glowing red eyes. The figure came onto their porch and peered through their windows. The family were so horrified that they locked their doors and called the police. But by the time they arrived, the creature had vanished. News of the strange sighting spread around the world, and newspapers nicknaming the creature the Mothman. Between 1966 and 1967, over 100 people saw the mysterious Mothman. On December 15th of 1967, a major disaster hit the town of Point Pleasant when the Silver Bridge collapsed during rush hour traffic. The cars plunged into the dark waters of the Ohio River, and over 46 people were killed in the incident. That night, eerie lights were seen in the sky all over Point Pleasant. The Mothman was never seen again after the bridge collapsed. Many people believe that the Mothman had something to do with the disaster. Mothman has also been sighted just before other world tragedies, such as the tsunami in India, Chernobyl in Russia, the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the September 11th attack in New York. In 2002, the story was made into a movie, The Mothman Prophecies, starring Richard Gere and Laura Linney. The paranormal reality TV show Paranormal State investigated the Mothman mystery in 2008. Mothman is not just described as a creature, but according to most religious professionals, the Mothman is more of a demonic entity of sorts. A mysterious paranormal creature believed to be an omen of death. It is also believed to be an omen of disaster as well. Anyone who sees him knows that disaster is near. It's believed that the sighting of a Mothman is to act as a warning to those who know that disaster is imminent. Unfortunately, most people who have seen the Mothman rather choose to forget about him due to his scary nature. But one thing is clear: every time the Mothman is near, disaster comes with it. Do you believe in this ancient and powerful creature? What would you do if you saw it? How would you react? But one thing's for sure: the Mothman is quite terrifying. Not only that, but if you see the Mothman, wherever you are, then that is a sign disaster is near. And let's hope you will not be one of the victims caught in that disaster. About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the US. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night, and never once had a reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke with my roommate that even the drug dealers in the city were polite, but all of that changed in just a few minutes of one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 or 2 in the morning, and I was walking near a police patrolled park, quite a ways from my apartment. It was a quiet night, even for a weeknight, with very little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street on my side was the silhouette of a man dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance walking, headed straight for me. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me by. The closer he got, the more I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky, and wearing an old suit. He danced closer still until I could make out his face. His eyes were open wide and wild, head tilted back slightly, looking off at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painful, wide, cartoony smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me, but still looking skyward, smile still wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again, but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move. Once I had put about half a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street and sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he had been standing to find him gone. For the briefest of moments, I felt relieved, until I noticed him again. He had crossed the street, and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure, due to the distance and the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I had looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he had moved very fast. So shocked that I stood there for some time, staring at him, and then he started moving toward me again. He took giant, exaggerated, tiptoed steps, as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone, except he was moving very, very quickly. I'd like to say at this point I ran away or pulled out my pepper spray or my cell phone or anything at all, but I didn't. I just stood there, completely frozen, as the smiling man crept towards me. And then he stopped again, about a car length away from me, still smiling his smile, still looking to the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to my mind. What I meant to say was, "What do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone. What came out was a whimper. What? Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. I heard it in my own voice, and that only made me more afraid. But he didn't react to it at all. He just stood there, smiling, and then after what felt like forever, he turned around very slowly and started dance-walking away. Just like that. Not wanting to turn my back to him again, I just watched him go. Until he was far enough away to almost be out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I just watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger. He was coming back my way, and this time he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off the side of the road and back onto a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder every few seconds, always expecting to see his stupid smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that night, and I never went out for another walk again. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk, he didn't look high, he looked completely and utterly insane, and that's a very, very scary thing to see. To make matters worse, every night when I go to bed, all I can see is his face, and that fucking smile, that creepy smile that he shows. I don't think I'll ever get a decent night's sleep again, knowing that he could still be out there somewhere. One summer night, a teenage boy was going out on a date with his new girlfriend. He picked her up at her house, and they drove out to the edge of town. They parked the car in a scheduled spot that was well known as Lover's Lane. As they gazed out at the lights of the town, the boy put his arm around the girl and switched on the car radio so they could listen to some romantic music. He leaned over and the young couple began kissing and cuddling. Just as they were getting in the mood, the music suddenly stopped, and a newsreader's voice came on the radio. "This is an emergency announcement. Earlier tonight, a crazed murderer escaped from the state mental asylum. Police are warning citizens to be on their guard, since the patient is considered armed and dangerous. The insane killer is nicknamed the Hookman, because after he lost his right hand in an accident, it was replaced with a steel hook. Everyone in the area should be on the lookout for a man fitting this description. If you see anything suspicious, you should report it to the police immediately." The girl became frightened and asked to be taken home. She knew that the state insane asylum was not far from Lover's Lane. She was also worried about the remote area where they were parked, which was the perfect spot for a deranged madman to lurk. The boy was feeling brave and assured his girlfriend that they were perfectly safe. He locked all of the car windows and doors, then tried to kiss her again. The girl became frantic and pushed him away, insisting that they leave immediately. In a huff, the boy slammed the car into gear and spun its wheels as he pulled out of the parking space. On the way back to town, they both calmed down, but the girl still held on tightly to her boyfriend. When they pulled up outside the girl's house, the boy got out of the car and walked around to the open where the door was. For a long time, he just stood there, staring at the door. At first, the girl couldn't figure out what was wrong. Then she realized that her door was still locked. She smiled and unlocked it. Still, the boy just stood there. The girl was puzzled, then rolled down her window. Then she saw that the boy was staring down at the door handle. Slowly, she looked down herself and began to scream uncontrollably. There, hanging from the door handle, was a bloody stainless steel hook.